So I'm ready.
Okay, cool. So I did these last night. So the first one went off at 8:19 p.m. And I've written, I'm painfully bloated, and this is the overwhelming inner experience. My stomach feels tight and heavy, and I kind of feel nauseous. Autopilot inside my brain, though. I'm taking in words on the screen of my phone, but certainly no audio as I read them, nor anything visual, but I'm seeing the words and attempting to retain the message.
Okay. So autopilot thing with the words, or we'll see about that first. But it sounds like this bloating thing is in your experience, or is that the background, or is that experienced at this moment?
No, that was very much, that was the main part of my experience for sure.
Okay. So what is that like at this moment?
Yeah, well, I wrote feels tight and heavy in my stomach. So I just remember when the beep went off, like that was definitely the overwhelming sort of sensation. It was very front of mind. That was sort of taking up more of my consciousness, doesn't feel like the right word, but attention, I suppose, or awareness than the words that I was looking at on my screen.
So tight, heavy, and any particular part of the stomach, or just the whole region, or
Lower stomach.
lower stomach? Could you describe that more, like a tight, heavy, like pressure from having eaten
Pressure's a
something,
nice
or
word. I would use the word pressure. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know.
Are you? Is there context that would help? Had you just had a large meal or something, or is that not necessary to
No, I don't
understand
think
this?
so. To be honest, at risk of too much information, I just felt really bloated like all day and complained about it on my shoot earlier as well. So no, it had been a presence for a few hours.
Okay.
So stomach is an ambiguous term. Do you mean an organ stomach or the abdomen region, or? And
Nice question.
I don't really want to know whether it is the actual organ, but whether it feels like your organ, or does it feel like the abdominal region?
Starting to find it hard to remember, but I think sort of a little bit hard to differentiate in that it definitely feels like that lower abdomen region, but it wasn't like a muscular pain like that I would associate with my actual abs if I ever used them. It was felt like more deep and within than that.
Okay.
So I'd go more stomachy in that sense. Do you know what I mean?
I think I'm happy with that.
And when you say lower, kind of lower stomach, would it just be like lower torso, as in like the stomachy region,
Would you
or is it
like me
like
to?
the lower part of?
This is getting very medical today. Like here's the band of my pants. I would say like here specifically, like about the size of my hand to that exact spot.
Okay. Is it
Sorry,
kind of,
this is what was happening.
no, you can give as much detail as you think is useful to understand it. Um, does it seem like it's constrained in a very specific area, or is that more just to show the general region?
No, like the tightness and heaviness and pressure was definitely that very specific area. Yeah, about the size of my hand and in that sort of region. And so that feeling was the overwhelming thing that was in my awareness at that point for sure.
So this tight pressure, is there is it just the physical sensation, or is there anything uh, accompanying that, or would you say it's purely physical?
I'm not. What else could it be beyond that?
Um, well, I don't want to say it has to be one thing, but I don't know, a negative, pain thing with it,
Uh-huh.
or
No, it was just physical. Yeah, it was just physical. There wasn't like I think, did I even say, yeah, I said a strange phrase, but autopilot inside my brain. And I think that's sort of me trying to distinguish that like this was a physical thing that was very front of mind. That's a bad term to use. This was a physical thing that was very present in my awareness, but it sort of, in a sense, was disconnected from like my thoughts per se. So like I felt like my brain was like looking at the words on my phone screen or whatever, and I was aware of this physicality in my stomach, but it wasn't, my brain wasn't then also thinking about that in a negative or positive way, or thinking about the food I ate that made me that way. Like they were kind of two distinct things.
It's more in the body. And just to get back to the physical part of it, was it more kind of like on the surface, like pressure and you feel it on the surface, or is it kind of deeper within, extending within?
Perhaps a little bit of both.
Okay. So I feel like maybe I'll leave pushing on defining the exact physical coordinates, because I feel like if I try to push too far, I might get things that reach the limits of what you can say about it. But the words on the screen. So you're looking at words on your phone screen at the same time, or a different screen, or?
No, yeah, I think actually it was my laptop screen.
Okay, your laptop screen.
Yeah.
And that is that part of your experience, consciousness, whatever now, or is that more just an action that's happening and the main thing is the stomach?
Yeah,
sensation?
I think no, it was present in that I was like aware of the words that I was reading on the screen and like attempting to retain them, but at the same time what was happening in my stomach was sort of more intense than the act of retaining the information I was reading.
So the stomach is more intense.
Mm-hmm.
And the words, the retaining, were there specific words at this time, or is that not so much part of it?
I didn't write them down and I can't even remember. I think I was reading an email, like, it was sort of whatever.
So maybe the specific words, right? Is the kind of attempting or trying to retain them, is that something that's there at this moment, or is
Yeah, like I was just in the act of reading. So that involves me trying to retain the words that I am reading. But yeah, I think the reason I didn't even write down those words was because that part felt very secondary to the physical thing.
It's very secondary and much more about the physical thing. Could you say like a percentage, 80-20, 90-10, or something else?
I struggle to remember accurately, but like I think 80-20, 70-30, that sort of thing.
80-20. And is there more you could say about the word screen part? Like what that was like at this moment?
I don't think so. I was laying down in bed, I was reading an email on my laptop and sort of, I guess, like distracted by the physical thing that was happening in my stomach. So that's why I can't really like recall much else about the specificity of the words I was reading and whatnot.
Okay. Do you have more questions, Russ?
Nope, I'm good.
All right.
Number 2.
Number 2.
This one went off quite a while later, 9:03 p.m. And I really didn't write much down for this. I'm really sorry, Russ. I'm watching a film on my laptop and it feels very autopilot.
And does autopilot mean I'm taking in the film, or does it mean my eyeballs are aimed at the film and I'm not absorbing it, or something else, or some of each?
I think absorbing it, definitely, like eyeballs are locked in, absorbing the film, wasn't distracted, like it wasn't going off in any other ways or whatever. So I was looking at the film, taking in whatever, but I don't think I was like there was nothing to grab onto that was so enthralling or whatever that felt so overwhelming that I needed to note it. I was just kind of quite simply just watching and taking in the film.
And does watching and taking in mean something like I'm carried along by it? I'm whatever it is that the director is trying to get me to do, I'm doing. And is that the way it's
Yeah.
in?
Yeah.
Okay. And is this a commercial film? I don't really need to know, but what it is. But I mean, are we watching a publicly available movie or a
Yeah,
film that you?
the movie. I was watching the movie Saltburn. Actually, if you want to know, Saltburn. But yes, so it was on Amazon. It's just come out. Very good.
So what I understand is that I'm watching the movie Saltburn. I'm carried along by the action. But I'm not in any analytical way or in any particularly focused way. I'm not noticing the character's hair or the any particular feature. But I'm also not spaced out. I'm absorbed in the sense that I'm carried along by the movie.
Yes.
Then I'm good.
Is there, so you're not noticing any specific element like, oh, this part of the scene or whatever, but at this moment, is what's happening part of your experience? Is like what's going on part of it?
I didn't write it down because I don't think it was at the time. It felt really like incidental.
Okay, so the specific content. So would you think knowing specific content would help us understand your experience at this moment, or no?
Not at this particular moment. No, I remember being aware of that when I was going to write things down, but like it wasn't relevant.
Okay. I'm good for that one.
Okay.
The film keeps going for a while, so we're going to stay on this topic for a bit. So the next beep went off, like only 5 minutes later, really. Oh, no. No, sorry, I skipped ahead. 9:41, so 40 minutes later. And I've written, still watching the film and just absorbing the audio and the visual. No overwhelming feeling of sensation or particular thoughts.
And audio and visual, is that more those specific parts of it are present to you, or is it more just like the sample right before? Absorbing whatever's going on, like the whole package.
The whole package. Yeah.
Okay, so it's not like there's a specific element of the audio or the visual that's
no.
standing.
No.
And in here, do you think, same kind of question, do you think if we knew something about the content of the scene, what was going on, would that, or would that give us some picture of your experience or not?
I still don't think so here. There's a beep later where I kind of make a note about something that is a bit more like that. So I know what you mean, but I don't think so on these. I think the one thing that I really wanted to try and get across in this one, probably as an extension of the last beep as well, was that there was no, like it was quite autopilot-y in the sense that there was no overwhelming feeling or like emotional response to what I was watching, or no thought. I wasn't, looking at a character and going, I like him, I don't like him, or that's an interesting shot, or like none of that was present. It was that sort of autopilot that I have discussed in other scenarios, vacuuming or whatever, where I'm totally engaged in this action of watching this film, and it's really that simple.
Yeah. It's kind of the absorbing, engaged flavor of autopilot, and not like a nothingness flavor of autopilot. Not just your eyeballs are pointed, but
there's a retention here. There's an engaged with the thing. Yeah, for sure. And I guess another way to phrase that is that I'm just like not distracted as well.
Okay. Yeah. Any other questions, Russ?
So, am I understanding correctly that what you wrote about this included absorbing the audio and the video, and that is equally applicable to the previous beep? This is sort of like a refinement of what you could have said about the previous beep. Is that
I think
is that
so.
true?
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
not like you're
I
trying to distinguish something from this beep with the last beep.
No, exactly right. I think it was me trying to double down on trying to find language for it. Yeah.
Okay, that's what I understood.
hmm
But
I understood too.
number 4.
I honestly have a question. I feel like this question I've asked twice. I don't know, how fruitful it is, but about the content and if something about the content is there present.
hmm
Uh, Russ, do you know what I mean by that, or do you, or how it's phrased, or if there are other ways to phrase it, or if it's even a good line
I,
to go
I
down?
so I wrote a note to myself in the vicinity of the first question that I was trying to figure out whether you were asking a meta awareness question, and I wasn't sure that whether it was or not, and I decided I wasn't going to ask it because it might take too much time to answer that question.
Yeah. No, I don't mean it in a meta way, but just there were some samples during conversation where to you it seemed like the same experience if you were talking or if your friend was talking or whatever the conversation was about, that the content was the same. So I was trying to see if the content here of your experience is the same or very, very similar, at each moment, or doesn't depend at all. It wasn't so much if you were paying attention to a specific part of the scene or a character's hair color or whatever, but just if something about the content is at all part of whatever your experience is like at this moment.
Hang on. Sorry. One moment. Sorry. Thank you. Housekeeping. Yeah, I know what you mean. And I think that there are times when that is the case, but not these ones. But I think I do know what you mean, Julian.
So it's more about absorbing, being engaged, but and nothing specific about what's going on. Just
So I guess the reason I think that's a meta awareness question is that for her to certainly there is some aspect of her experience which differs from this scene from that scene. This is the scene where there's a car chase, and that's the scene where there's a love scene or whatever. Her experience is going to be different about in those
well,
kinds of things in some
I wouldn't,
important way.
assume, I wouldn't assume that. Um, I wouldn't assume that, which is well, I would like to ask about that. Is there something about Beep 3 that's different from Beep 2? Like,
Mm.
even if you're not noticing a specific part of the action or this or that, is there something about what's happening in the movie that makes Beep 3 different from Beep 2?
I don't think so with these beeps, but there is a later beep where I think you will get what you're craving a little bit.
I'm not craving anything. Um,
No, but like a distinction because, like, yeah, I
okay.
know what you mean. I don't think so on these occasions, but I think that there is a later one that there is a bit of a distinction and that the
Okay.
content of what I'm watching at the time is
Yeah.
sort of relevant.
Yeah, I'm perfectly happy if there's a distinction or no distinction.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, yeah.
just to kind of find out. Hmm. Should we move on to number
Edward,
4?
number 4.
1, 2, 3, 4. 4. This literally only went off 5 minutes later at 9:47, and I've written exactly the same as above. That's all I wrote.
Okay.
And so you take that to be carried along by the movie.
Yeah.
Okay, then I'm good.
And can I ask the same question as before, or I'm asking that question? Is there something about what's happening on screen, even if you're not specifically noticing or paying attention, that would make Beep 4 even just like a tiny bit different from Beep 3 or Beep 2?
No, not based on what I wrote. I literally wrote exactly the same as above, so I didn't feel so.
Okay. Then I'm good on that one.
Okay, so
Uh,
this one is a bit different. So I've got, this went off quite a while later, so 10:25, and I've written the distinct thought slash phrase of for God's sake, what's going on with this Wi-Fi was in my head because it kept buffering at that exact moment. It's really hard to explain the way this thought happens. It's as though it appears all at once and also one word after the other. So like when I say it appears, like that phrase appears, I don't mean visually or audibly, just kind of conceptually. I felt my heart racing a bit too, as the movie was definitely nearing its climax. So that sensation was there, which is different to previous beeps. And when I say that, I mean I felt a sort of beat and throb in my chest.
Okay. So you're thinking, or you got this thing, for God's sake, what's going on with this Wi-Fi?
Yeah.
And that exact phrase is there, or something like it, or
That exact phrase.
and are the words present, or is it
Yes.
more just what's going on? What your thought is so tightly explained by those words that those are just the perfect words for them.
That it definitely was that exact phrase.
That exact phrase.
Mm-hmm.
So it is that exact phrase. Are the words themselves present in some way?
Present in the sense of like, well, yeah, like the words have to be present for that phrase to be present, but like it was like the phrase all at once, but then I also sort of simultaneously, which maybe I've tried to describe previously, it's as though the phrase is all there at once, but also does kind of unfold really fast. I don't know how to describe that, but anyway, but it's not like, yeah, I can't see the words or I can't hear the words in my voice or anyone else's voice. It's definitely like a concept.
Okay, so it's not like you're hearing the words or seeing or inwardly speaking or whatever, but what this phrase is there, it's present all at once. It comes on at the same time, but also like it's sequential, one after the other.
Yeah, I know that's like literally an oxymoron, but it kind of both feel true somehow.
Okay, so both are true at the same time. For God's sake, what's going on with this Wi-Fi? Are there other details about that part of your experience?
The film was just definitely getting to a really interesting part, and so it had just started to buffer, and it sort of took me out of the, I guess that snapped me out of the more autopilot thing of the previous beeps of just being engaged with the film. Like the act of the buffering snapped me out of that process, and then we get this other thought where, you know, there's something else sort of in my awareness, and so yeah, that's what happened. And then at the same time, though, when I was interrupted by that, yeah, I noticed that like feeling in my chest. That I guess I noticed that because of the interruption, like because of the buffering, then I kind of was taken out of the act of watching the film, and I realized like how engaged I was with the film in a physical sense as well.
So your heart is racing. You feel a beat in your chest, neck. I don't know. Or some other part of it.
Chest.
Which chest?
Yeah.
Okay. So a beat in the chest, and you say, "Well, is there this feeling and then a separate noticing of it, or is it more just feeling this sensation?"
I think feeling the sensation, and then once I had to then notice what had been happening when the beep went off, I think I noticed it. But like in the moment, I don't think I was like meta aware of my heart is really racing, if that makes sense.
There's not a meta thing. Is it a specific area of the chest, part of the chest, or?
I don't
general?
like. I mean, I was laying down, so it kind of just feels like not necessarily wherever my heart is, I guess, but like there.
Okay. So heartbeat.
Yeah.
And a fast heartbeat. There,
Yeah, I would say so. It was heightened.
was it heightened as in more pressure, stronger or faster? Do you think?
Bit of both. Like in general, I don't notice my heartbeat, So to even notice it, I would use the word heightened because there was an awareness of the actual beat, and then I would say it kind of felt a bit fast and a bit
Mm.
throbby.
And you mentioned at one point the noticing the buffering
Mhm.
kind of made you notice the beat. Is there kind of that sequence to it, or is it more just at this very moment before the beep, just these two things, like what's going on with his Wi-Fi, and then also the heartbeat?
Yeah, I think they were simultaneous.
Okay, just simultaneous. Um, but the heartbeat thing isn't. It's not tied or related to the Wi-Fi thing. It's not like frustration with the Wi-Fi.
No, I'd say it had become present in the movie, becoming like quite interesting and very, very engaging in a way that like these beeps have gone off. This beep's gone off much later than the earlier ones, so the film had really like gotten more intense by this point. So even if the Wi-Fi thing hadn't happened, I think how I would describe the act of watching at this point would be very different because the film had intensified and the content was doing things to me in a way that it wasn't earlier. But then I think that I became really aware of that physical sensation because the buffering snapped me out of this beautiful sort of autopilot engaged in a thing watching a movie, because the buffering had interrupted that. I was then really aware of, oh God, I was really enthralled.
Okay, so we have the for God's sake, what's going on with the Wi-Fi thing, the heart racing thing. Is there anything else in your experience or awareness at this time?
I don't think so.
Okay. And for God's sake, what's going on with the Wi-Fi? When you read that out, it kind of sounds like frustration. Is
Yeah,
frustration part of this, or some
yeah.
emotion?
I considered lobbing that up just then too. I said the only other thing this I was going to say the only other thing that was perhaps part of my awareness was a feeling of frustration and annoyance. Like there's definitely some sort of like negative undertone to that
Some
thought.
undertone. But by that, do you mean it's not separate from the thought itself? It's not like a separate feeling of frustration, but like the thought itself it might be kind of tinged in some way with frustration or something negative.
I think both are true. I think that I felt frustrated and then that phrase happened in my head and like which is there first or whether they're intrinsically linked, I'm not sure, but both can be true, I think.
Is there more you could say about this frustration element? If it's
So
there, because
can I back this conversation up because I'm a little worried about where we're headed here.
I kind of wanted to undercut that by saying I introduced this frustration thing. So if we keep
Right.
pushing for that,
That's what
to be aware that it's something I brought in. Yeah, I just wanted to, or
right.
to even give you an avenue to say, I don't know, maybe let's not probe that because we're not certain.
Well, I think maybe we can probe it, but we got to probe it with a little bit of more dispassionately or more openly or
Yeah.
unleadingly or whatever. So there's no question about that. The phrase is a frustrated phrase. The grammar of the phrase is a frustrated phrase, and I think it's possible to have a feeling of frustration and utter a frustrated phrase. And I also think it's possible to utter a frustrated phrase and not feel any frustration at all. And I think it's also possible to feel frustration and not utter a phrase. So all those things are separate. So now the question is, at the moment of the beep, if we can, now that it's the water is a little bit over the dam, is there a feeling of frustration that is there present, or is it more that there is a frustrated phrase being uttered?
No, I think a feeling of frustration was present.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then how in what way? How do you?
Hmm. Um, I That's really hard to articulate, I think. I mean, I'm going to say some things and they might not be helpful, but like I was frustrated by the fact that I'd been snapped out of the beautiful process but snapped out of the act of watching the film. So how does that manifest itself? I mean, like, I guess just in a way, I was aware of myself again. Does that make any sense? Like I was snapped back into reality a little bit. And so I was frustrated by that. I'm not sure that really answers your question though, Russ.
Well, I don't think it does either, and I think maybe it's not possible to answer it, and maybe it's never has been possible to answer it. But now, after this much conversation, it's probably not possible to answer it. I think that's
I know what you mean. Like, I feel frustrated. Okay. What does that feel like or look like? I don't know.
Can I throw out a possibility, and it can just be a possibility that you can discard if you want?
Mm-hmm.
But maybe what you're calling frustration is that there's no longer this absorption. There's no longer being in the movie,
Mm-hmm.
and also like you're noticing or the heart racing sensation is part of your experience now.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that these things like the heart pounding, the not being absorbed, is something that after the fact that might be called frustration. Um, Tell me if that's off the mark.
I don't think it's off the mark. Yeah, I think that's sort of like what happened, but it still doesn't really feel like a good way to describe frustration.
Okay, so
But I
there
found
might
that
be
really hard.
something.
That's really interesting, Russ.
so all that Julian just said is true in an explanatory sense. All those things happen, and then it would be an interpretation, I guess, as to whether that is what feels like frustration. And the question is whether there is something that feels frustrating that you could say, well, as the
Mm,
result of those things that Julian identified, well, this is where it came from. But I
yeah.
also think that I think that feelings are hard to describe. That's probably why we call them feelings rather than thoughts or something. But sometimes frustration is very easy to describe for some people. Sometimes, I was feeling frustrated. How do you know that? Well, I felt a shortness of breath and my hands were clenched or whatever. There's the people can say this is the aspect that makes me recognize frustration.
Mm,
But other people will say, I was yelling at my husband, and but I didn't feel angry. There were angry words coming out of my mouth, but I can't say that I felt that.
mm.
It's
That's really interesting. This is like just a good chat for like future ones to try and be aware of that, to
mhm.
note. Yeah.
I think it's very. I think conversations about feelings are in general difficult, or I shouldn't say in general difficult, because for some people sometimes they're very easy, and then for a lot of times it's very difficult.
Yeah, interesting.
But I'd like to ask another series of maybe related questions, and that is that about the heart beating, which you
Hmm.
originally attributed to being from the movie, and in
Hmm.
conversation with Julian, then you reiterated they were from the movie. But I would like to know why you would say that the heart rate came from the movie. Is there something about your experience that says this is a movie heart rate rather than a interrupted heart rate?
Yep. Yes, because I just feel like it was really relevant to the context of where the film was at. So it's definitely like in its climax of sort of like, character development was really unfolding, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is like, I was kind of like absolutely glued to the screen, like, wow, the movie's really getting good at the moment, and I was kind of like, oh, is that gonna happen? Is that guy gonna reveal himself as this? And then it was buffering, and then I noticed my heart rate, so it felt like a suspenseful sort of heart rate as opposed to a hot-headed, angry heart rate.
Pissed off heart rate. Okay, and
Yeah.
that's what I gathered, but that's what I wanted to ask.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I'm good.
I'm good on that too.
Cool. So
Number
then
6.
it was the last one was at 10:47, and I've written. This was tricky. I don't really remember, and I think it's because the beep kind of startled me because I was at the very ending of the movie and I was so engulfed in it.
So should we start with I don't remember, just leave it at that? Or should we say I'm more engrossed in the movie than I was in other places, and so by the time I got around to processing the beep, like it just seemed like I couldn't do it.
I think the latter. The reason, so like I would have previously had this beep go off and had this feeling or sensation and been like, oh, I don't know, do another one. But then I remember last time I did that, you guys were like, still write it down if that happens. So this was very much that. But I think it's immediate. Like the beep went off and immediately I was like, oh my gosh, I have no idea what was happening then. And I think, as you just said, I think it is because I was so engrossed, more so than previous beeps while watching the film, that I just had no idea what was even happening. I was so startled by the beep that I had no idea.
So the previous beeps that were watching the movie, I was being carried along by the movie, but in an interruptible kind of a way, apparently. When the beep happened, I could say, well, that was the beep. I was watching the movie. But here, I'm apparently being carried along by the movie, and when the beep happens, I can't even say that.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Okay.
I was engrossed by this point. Very good film.
Then I think I'm good.
I think I'm good. I'm good too. Yeah, I had something along the lines of Russ's last question, that in some other beeps you were absorbed in the movie and that's all there was, but you could remember.
Mm-hmm.
But here it's not the same. It's not just that you can write or say to us that you were totally absorbed. And so, but for you saying like totally absorbed in the movie would still seem like just a guess or maybe not accurate.
In relation to this last beep?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a guess, but I find it interesting because, like on previous beeps, I've been like, oh, I'm like totally absorbed in the film. This almost feels like, I guess, when we found different distinctions of like autopilot or nothingness in my head, this feels like I found another layer of being like completely absorbed in watching something or taking in information. Like, to me, this was an absolute new layer of being engrossed by something, so much so that I was just almost zoned out. Like, I was so locked in that I have no idea what was happening. And that's different to the beeps previously when I would have said, oh, I was just like fully engaged with this film. Seems like another step beyond that in intensity, perhaps.
Yeah. I'm good on this beep.
Me too. And what I would say, sort of in general, is that I think people are multiprocessors, and I think it takes some processing to process the beep. And I think I think it's quite possible that you can have an exterior world processing which is going on at 2% or something like that, but keeping track of things, and then when things get really interesting or hairy or whatever, then you can turn that off, and so the beep just doesn't get processed.
Mm.
processed as equally easily or quickly or fastly as at other times.
Yeah, that definitely feels true. It was
So,
just like immediately
so what
I
I'm
was like, on.
what I'm trying to say is that the beep is not actually a physical thing. The beep is a physical thing. Obviously, in the real world, there's vibrations going on or something like that. But you have to process the beep before it becomes a beep. There are vibrations in the air,
Mm.
and then you have to apply your gray matter to that and end up realizing that that's the beep. And sometimes I think that's a harder thing to do than other times.
That's really interesting. Anyway, that was all my beeps. Hope you enjoyed me watching a
Well,
film.
Makes me
good,
want to
good,
watch this movie.
good for
Sounds
me.
engrossing.
Yeah, it was good, Julian. You should watch it. I think you'd like it.
Maybe family movie night.
So shall we do it again?
Yes.
Down.
So, my movements. Are there any particular days or anything next week that work best for anyone? I can kind of work backwards a bit.